what on earth are psychedelics? And how do we think about them? How do we think about the experiences that people have? How do we make sense of it? And then how does that inform our writing, thinking, and practices? Especially, so I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a psychologist. And I just sort of, this is a little rough, but I wanted to share the different frames that I think kind of come to a conceptual cluster F in the midst of the psychedelic controversy. And so, you know, you have a camp of people who are informed deeply by the neurobiological lens, and they, to oversimplify, they say it happens in the brain, the it being psychedelic action, the mechanisms of action, the question, why do people tend to get better? Less depressed, less anxious, less addicted, less traumatized when they take psychedelics in a supportive therapy context. And this is the camp that, you know, asks questions like, if we could put people into a coma and give them the psychedelic agent, would they get better? Or do you have to be awake for it? You know, is the therapy necessary? Is all of that really important or just superfluous? There's also the CBT camp, and there was a recent, and it's sort of defined by the sort of mantra that it happens in thoughts and behaviors. And there's a recent kind of controversial paper that came out that argued that CBT should really, including mindfulness-based sort of practices, should be seen as the default way to do this. CBT should be the default therapy, which got a lot of flack, but is one camp's way of understanding the work. I think in a less organized way, there's a broadly therapeutic and relational camp, which states that, you know, benefit for people, the psychedelic action happens in relationships in the room with the facilitators, but also the internal relational garden of the individual person's mind, their loved ones, their attachments. And so this is informed by psychodynamic and relational theory and also research on therapeutic alliance and common factors, and also a broader conceptualization of the person as being in community. There's also, of course, this sort of somatic, Hakomi body embodiment practices. It happens in the body. And of course, not just the physical soma of the body, but the mind-body, broadly conceptualized. And lastly, there's this, like, today's topic, you know, so the spiritual. It happens in the sacred, in the divine. And there's really a couple of warring camps here. The dominant narrative conceptually has been the mystical experience, and there's reasons for that, as defined by the Mystical Experience Questionnaire, which we know is a significant mediator of benefit in a lot of psychedelic trials. But I've given a previous talk where I really critique the MEQ as being based in a sort of non-dualist and Vedantic theological tradition, informed also by Christian mysticism, where it's kind of pulled out of that and edictly dropped down into as a measure in psychedelic experience. But my specialization has been long-form, in-depth interviews with people who take psilocybin in our clinical trials at NYU and at Yale, and MDMA in the MAPS trials, and DMT and ketamine. And when we talk with them, the breadth of their spiritual lives and experiences are broader than this alone. And so there's this other sort of critiques of this mystical experience where we can think, and I defer to the theologians in the hall, but, you know, think about people's theistic experiences, their nature and indigenous mystical experiences, their encounters with entities and aliens and angels and psychopomps. The experience in a feminist tradition of the real in relationship with others, of the queer idea of subversion and play and political as being sacred and spiritual. And it just feels to me like when I'm in a psychedelic room, all these different camps are oftentimes talking past each other, or and it's really not coalesced into a complementary whole. How might these different frames of analysis and which have very specific modes of study and of practice be meaningfully merged, not to have a facile relationship that they are all true, but potentially useful or helpful, or potentially not necessarily countering one another.